Tate. Well, going back around about 6 years, I think it was, that we actually started to engage a lot with Māori communities in two of the main catchments. And so that was the Whanganui catchment with Tama Opopo and the Manawatu catchment, mainly on the eastern side. So in those early years, I think Chris was with me and a few others, and we're really discussing with a lot of Māori groups up and down the river what erosion and sediment that actually mean to them. You know, what were the issues, what were their perspectives, what their understanding, and then we had our science understand what these were. And we've heard it all today coming through, very, very strong science coming through. And really my work has been mainly with Māori communities on these two sides. So we actually had 2 subcontracts running ever since the program started. And to a certain extent, what we wanted to do was to run 2 parallel streams of the way, because our view was that it was very important to understand Māori aspirations around the work that we were doing, to understand what their research priorities were, not forcing them into our work in the sense of, you know, what can you take out of this? And it's really important to run this work next to our work, and that's what we've done right back. And I can't even remember when the program started. I put 2017.
18, it started in 18.
2018, but I know we went up the river a long, long time ago, and we were working with those different communities. So Whanganui River catchment was one of those areas that we worked right from down in the lowland areas of Whanganui right up to Hiruharama. We didn't of course go right up to the top of the catchment, but we worked with those communities there. And a bit of background around the Whanganui. It's very interesting because they've got a Whanganui River settlement claim that came through, and that's really given legal entity to the river. So it's one of the few rivers in the world that is actually established a legal entity in its own right. And that really came through on the Māori side, and they've got a governance set up over there that was established. 2 human trustees act on behalf, one from the Crown side, one from the Māori side. And that's what's actually the governance of the groups that are set up to really manage the river now as a legal person. So it's a very interesting case study internationally, the Whanganui, and it was within this Te Awa Tupua framework. What I really wanted to show is that these core values for Te Awa Tupua, they actually came out from the 1800s, and then the claimants were around in the 1930s that actually pushed this claim through. And some of the early concepts like mountains to the sea, which we talk about now, I am the river is me, but large streams flow into one another and form one river. You know, so the concepts are very much the river as the source of the physical and spiritual sustenance for the people. Those concepts were really broader outside of the river. They're really talking about the catchment as a whole and having to understand all the tributaries, all the rivers, everything as an ecosystem within that catchment. And they're really beautiful concepts that we're framing now within the Western approaches that we're using increasingly in the way that we're starting to look at rivers and catchments. So I just wanted to show that a lot of these really early thoughts and concepts were coming through right back, going back hundreds of years. They've come out, and now we're seeing this better alignment with the way we're trying to understand rivers, streams, ecosystems, catchments. This whole mountains to the sea approach really was something that Māori talked about hundreds of years ago. Right. And so what we did, we gave iwi a lot of freedom to operate with this work. We didn't want to really force them into what we were doing. And it was very important for them to identify their own research priorities, their own aspirations. And that's where this work has led to in terms of completed plans. So each of the marae, all the way up in the Whanganui River side, have developed a hapū management plan. So that's been really important because that actually sets the context for all of the science knowledge that's coming through today. Where does this fit within the iwi way of looking at the river, and where are their erosion problems? Where are their sediment problems? Or where do they think those problems are? And then how does the science start to feed in and address that? So there's a huge program of work going over there at the moment on planting trees. So we can just see that the iwi are actually, they've got their own project running and wanting to set up their own plant nurseries all the way up the river. So there's a lot of work was put in around each of the marae and around how the younger people too, rangatahi, how the younger people really took up this knowledge and what they were interested in from the iwi perspective in terms of research and mataranga Māori knowledge, but then how could that Māori knowledge form a framing for the science knowledge that has been spoken about today? How can that be brought in? So a lot of interest. And so these are some of the projects that were set up over there through the time from the 2018, learning tupuna methods, which is ancestral methods of gathering foods, understanding freshwater species. Kākahi is the freshwater mussel. Tuna, koura is crayfish. Tuna is the eel. Atutahi, inanga, whitebait, ngāori, common smelt. And so they're very interested in these freshwater species and how they're affected by sediment. So if you're going to talk about sediment, you wanted to frame it into a more Māori way of communicating some of this work, gathering local native seeds, growing tupu, the plantlings, reciting whakapapa. So this is all going back into the old traditional knowledge, practicing tikanga with marae, linking to with other initiatives that align with kaupapa. So a whole lot of projects we set up together. The STEC has actually resourced a lot of work over there from the 2018 and allowed the Māori communities to really start developing their own research priorities rather than just trying to say, oh, you must understand the science and bring that in. So this has been really rewarding to see a lot of this work being done in parallel to the work we've been doing. This is some of the work that Rawari, he was here before, but he's had to go back to Whanganui. So really acknowledge Rawari Tiniro, who's been leading all the Whanganui work on that side. And they went through and started to develop indicators too, but much more holistic than what we would be talking about. But they do have, they're very interested in protection of sites of significance, sustainable development of ancestral lands. One of the outcomes they want is a healthy, free-flowing river. And you can see some of the indicators that they've actually started to go through and put down. I think it's really important when we start to talk about science indicators that we actually understand on the other side some of the Māori indicators that they're putting down as well that really mean something to them. These are all the marae, and we've Pariwika was another one that we just added. Pipariki, so that's way up the top past Hiriharama that Chris and I have been quite involved in some time. But those are all the marae and pā that go all the way up the river. And then I sat down with Hugh, and as they were developing the hapū management plans, we decided to bring in some of our science work and locate some of these marae and the pā up the river and just show that if they're going to be trying to identify erosion areas and sediment source areas, that these sort of maps are quite useful in terms of targeting in future. It may not even be Māori land. It could be just that it's Māori-led projects that want to identify where should they be planting, what types of trees should they be planting, which is all coming up in their conversations at the moment. This was a huge issue they had at Urapa at Hiriharama, but that was sort of almost beyond our work into the engineering sort of field because it was such a very detailed study at the side of the road there, Ngāti Hau. So that was something that fits into the wider catchment, but was a very specific study where they've had to bring in engineers to try to stop the movement of that road and the Urapa, which is an old burial site. And so, just going through really quickly, Whanganui Tama Ōpoko work. These are just some of the main issues that they've been working on and how the hapū management plans, which are tribal management plans, are starting to address each of these. And then that identifies what sort of science and technical information they need to bring in to address these actual issues and research priorities for themselves. On the eastern Manawatu catchment, Manawatu River Accord was signed, of course, 2011 between the iwi, the Crown. So there is a river accord again, an agreement in how the river is sort of managed and an action plan developed. 11 hapū on that other side. Kauru, Eastern Manawatu River hapū, and they developed this strategy in 2016, and that's really driven a lot of the iwi projects on that side. And the goal is to restore the Māori or the health of the river. So very, very strong research priorities again and aspirations. Again, working with Arapira Paiwai, she was the main leader for the research on that side. And so STEC has actually contributed a huge amount of resource funding to allow them to get on with a whole range of projects on that side. And she's been reporting this work through an ArcGIS storybook rather than papers and things like that. It's been really interesting just her giving me updates on a regular basis through ARC. And so the iwi, one of the things we did very early on, we actually looked at what the iwi hapū needs were. Project and capability support was one of the huge ones, you know. So we come in as a group of scientists. We've got resources. They need resources, especially financial, to really support their projects. Hapū and kaitiaki management plans, 11 hapū on that side. Building Māori research capability capacity, another big need for them. Strengthening the Māori knowledge, oral histories, cultural indicators, etc. Cultural monitoring was a big area that they wanted to focus on. GIS mapping is another area that they've gone into in a huge way with cultural sites and restoring ecological and culturally significant areas. So all of these were needs, and then STEC has actually contributed resourcing to them being able to actually carry out a lot of this work. And here's some of the work we were involved in very early on, setting up cultural monitoring. Horizons were involved in this as well, and we were supporting them and their researchers to do this work and the indicators that they were starting to explore. And they've even gone beyond into eDNA has become a big thing over there now, measuring that, not just the different species, but they've been doing tuna surveys and everything else. So it's really neat to see this activity around cultural monitoring indicators. Rangatani iwi hapū work with the GIS mapping, so the ArcGIS story map presentation. Arapira's been upskilling herself in all of this work, and it's been really neat to see. Cultural health mapping and GIS 3D landscape mapping, which Andrew got involved in, and we started to do some work with them and drone mapping and that sort of thing too. So ngā mahi o ngā hapū, so the work of the hapū on that side. Some of the things, you know, see they were putting all their place names in. Ngā moko whare, so they were putting it onto GIS, and that related to all the different streams and rivers in the catchment, and then all their planting. If and then they've been giving me updates on how many plants they've been planting, you know, right down to that, and fence line planting, riparian planting, but also native forest planting and farmland, down to the number of trees they've been putting in, you know, and they've been establishing their own native plant nursery. So here the activity is they've been really getting out there. So STEC has really sat next to really supporting the iwi work and not saying this is the way you should do it. Basically letting them, you know, do this work, and it's been aligning really well to the STEC program. So the findings and results from this: meaningful relationships developed with two main iwi over the last 6 years, ongoing contacts with Tama Ōpoko, which is Rawari's also on Tangata Tiaki, which is the governance board over in Whanganui. So he was here before, just listening to a lot of the work that was being presented, using STEC program support. We built relationships, you know, through the STEC program, identified Māori research priorities and needs, which very, very important. There's continuation of iwi hapū-led projects, joint projects, built Māori research capacity in the two catchments, and support for advancing Māori knowledge, which really we gave some resourcing, and we've really contributed to them building up their own knowledge base. So I think that's about it. So kia ora tātou.